Leila's world had narrowed to the walls of a cold, dimly lit barn she was forced to live in by her cruel in-laws. The wooden beams creaked with every gust of wind, and the hay-strewn floor offered little comfort. Days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion, pain, and relentless fear. She had given birth to twin daughters barely a week ago, and every tiny whimper or coo from the infants was met with a deep sense of vulnerability. These children, innocent and fragile, were her only anchors in a life that had become defined by suffering. Her in-laws, a stern couple whose faces never softened and whose hearts seemed hardened against any tenderness, patrolled the barn with oppressive authority. Their words were sharp, cutting, often reminding her of her helplessness. "You're not fit to care for them," they would hiss. "You belong here." The twins stirred frequently, and each sound seemed to irritate them. Lila learned to move silently, to anticipate their moods, and to protect her daughters in any small way she could. She wrapped them in scraps of cloth to keep them warm, whispered lullabies from memory, and pressed her body close to shield them from the cold nights. Though the barn was isolated and the in-laws vigilant, Leila's mind remained active. She planned quietly, measuring the risks of escape, observing the patterns of her captors, and storing small hopes for freedom in the recesses of her heart. Each day brought a careful balance, feeding the twins, surviving the harsh environment, and subtly gathering strength for the chance she might get to flee. Her eyes, though tired, held a spark of determination, a quiet defiance that refused to be extinguished. The twins, though newborn and delicate, seemed to sense their mother's tension. They stirred more during moments of danger, and their fragile cries became both a source of anxiety and motivation. Lila pressed them closer, feeling an instinctive surge of love and protection. Each small life in her arms was a reminder that she could not allow fear to dominate. She whispered promises into their ears, pledging that one day they would be free from this misery, even if she could not see how it might happen in the stillness of the night. When the barn was silent and the wind swept across the prairie, Lila's thoughts drifted to freedom. She imagined wide open spaces, a home filled with warmth, and the laughter of her children unshackled by fear. These thoughts were fragile, almost dangerous in their hope, but they kept her alive. Every hour spent under the strict surveillance of her in-laws became a test of endurance, patience, and cunning. She learned to hide her fear, to feign compliance, and to move only when she believed it safe, despite the harshness of her reality. Lila's inner strength and resourcefulness shone. She gathered scraps of fabric to make small blankets for the twins, collected clean water from a distant trough, and even managed to find tiny moments of rest while listening for the faintest signs of approach from her oppressors. Her resolve was quietly heroic, a testament to the survival instincts of a mother willing to endure unimaginable hardship to protect her children. The tension of her situation was palpable. Every sound, every shadow, every creak of the barn was a reminder that danger was never far yet. Within this oppressive environment, a quiet determination took root. Lila understood that her story was not yet finished, that her daughters' lives and her own could still be reclaimed. She clutched the twins to her chest, whispered soft encouragements to herself, and held on to the belief that someone, somehow, might come to change their fate. In these first days of the story, Lila emerges not just as a victim, but as a survivor, a mother whose courage, intelligence, and love will guide her through the darkness toward the possibility of rescue and a new life. The barn may be her prison for now, but within her chest burns a light that cannot be snuffed out. The early morning sun barely warmed the frost-covered prairie as Ethan rode his horse along the winding trail. A solitary rancher by nature, he had spent years traversing the vast expanse of land surrounding his home, relying on his instincts and keen observation to navigate both the land and life. But today, Something unusual caught his eye, a flicker of movement near the edge of a distant barn. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it held a desperate, human quality that immediately drew his attention. Ethan slowed his horse. Scanning the area at first, it seemed empty, save for the harsh wind tugging at the wooden beams of a rundown barn. But then he noticed her, a young woman, her frame small and weary, holding two tiny infants in her arms. She moved cautiously, peeking toward the horizon as if afraid of being seen. Her hair was tousled by the wind, and the heavy blankets wrapped around the babies could not fully conceal their vulnerability. The sight struck him instantly, a mix of alarm, empathy, and a silent resolve to intervene for a moment. He watched from a distance, gauging the situation. Ethan's instincts told him that this was no ordinary woman tending to her children. There was fear in her posture, tension in her movements. He could sense that danger lingered nearby. Though he could not yet see it, every cautious step she took, every furtive glance toward the barn's interior, told a story of captivity and desperation. The rancher's sharp eyes caught glimpses of two older figures moving within the barn, stern and watchful. Their presence explained the woman's careful movements, their authority and cruelty, evident even from afar. Ethan dismounted quietly. His boots crunching softly in the frost, he approached with careful determination, mindful of not startling the woman or alerting the threatening figures nearby. Each step felt heavy with the weight of responsibility. He did not know her story fully, but he understood instinctively that she and the infants needed help. There was a primal, undeniable pull, a combination of moral obligation, empathy, and perhaps something deeper, a sense that intervening was the right thing to do. When Lila finally noticed him, her initial reaction was fear. Her eyes widened, and she instinctively clutched the twins closer to her chest. The intruders, her in-laws, were still inside the barn, and any misstep could trigger a violent reaction. But Ethan's calm demeanor, the steady way he raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture, sent a subtle message. He was not there to harm her. His voice, low and firm, carried across the frosty morning. "You're not alone. I can help you." The words hung in the cold air, barely audible, yet they were enough to spark a flicker of hope in Lila's heart. She hesitated, torn between the instinct to flee and the knowledge that this stranger might be her only chance for freedom. Her eyes scanned him closely, reading his posture, gauging his sincerity, weighing the risks. For the first time in days, she considered the possibility that someone outside the oppressive walls of the barn could intervene. Ethan remained patient, giving her the space to assess the situation. He observed her careful movements with the twins, noting how protective she was, how every gesture, no matter how small, demonstrated fierce maternal love. It reinforced his determination to help. These children, tiny and fragile, deserved safety. He was willing to face the in-laws, the risks, and whatever obstacles lay ahead to ensure they were protected. Silent understanding passed between them, an unspoken agreement that change was possible. Lila, despite her fear, nodded ever so slightly, signaling trust. She could not speak aloud. Any sound might alert her captors, but the gesture was enough. Ethan knew what he had to do. The rescue, which would define the next chapter of their lives, was about to begin. The wind howled across the frostbitten prairie, carrying with it the faint cries of infants and the muffled commands of unseen adults. Ethan moved cautiously, every step measured. As he approached the barn where Lila and her newborn twins were trapped, the cold nipped at his cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the heat of determination burning in his chest. He had seen enough to know that this was not merely a matter of theft or petty dispute. These children's lives and the life of their mother hung in delicate balance inside the barn. Lila was tense, crouched low on the hay-strewn floor, the twins wrapped in worn blankets against the chill. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow caused her heart to skip a beat. She had grown skilled at hiding her fear, at moving silently to avoid detection. Yet the constant threat of her in-laws' wrath pressed down on her like a heavy shroud. The babies stirred, their tiny fingers curling instinctively around her clothing. Each movement reminded her of her responsibility, not just for their survival, but for the hope that someday they could live freely. Without fear, Ethan reached the barn door and paused. Surveying the interior, he could see the stern faces of the in-laws through the cracks in the wooden panels. Their movements deliberate and menacing, he did not hesitate, drawing on his years of experience on the prairie. He calculated the best approach with a confident, steady stride. He entered, his presence commanding enough to momentarily startle the oppressors. His eyes locked onto Lila's, and in that instant, a silent understanding passed between them. Freedom was possible, but only if they acted quickly and decisively. "You're coming with me," he said firmly. His voice carrying across the cold, musty air of the barn. Lila froze, fear and disbelief warring within her. She had heard promises before empty, cruel assurances meant to manipulate or punish, but something in Ethan's steady gaze, in the resolute set of his shoulders, made her consider the possibility that this time was different. She tightened her hold on the twins, nodding slightly, and allowed him to guide her toward the exit. The in-laws protested, their voices sharp and threatening, but Ethan's calm authority and physical presence made it clear they would not prevail. He positioned himself between them and the trio, signaling with his stance and gaze that he would not allow any harm to come to Lila or her daughters. His movements were precise and deliberate, not aggressive but impossibly firm. Every step he took was measured to shield the vulnerable family, his attention divided between the twins' safety and anticipating the in-laws' reactions. Layla felt a surge of emotion she hadn't allowed herself in weeks: relief, hope, and a fragile trust. The twins, sensing a change in the energy around them, settled slightly, their soft cries easing as Ethan guided them toward the open prairie. The cold wind whipped past, but it carried with it something new. Possibility. The oppressive walls of the barn fell away, replaced by the wide expanse of freedom, the vast prairie stretching endlessly before them. As they emerged, Lila's legs trembled with exhaustion, but also with the adrenaline of escape. Ethan's steady hands ensured the twins were secure, cradled against warmth and protection. Each step forward was a step away from fear, from abuse, and toward a future she had dared only to imagine. The barn, once a prison, receded behind them, a symbol of the oppression she was leaving behind. In that moment, trust blossomed between Lila and Ethan. She realized that she had placed the most precious part of her life, her daughters, in the hands of a stranger. And yet, for the first time in weeks, she felt the beginnings of safety. Ethan, for his part, recognized the responsibility he had assumed, not just as a rescuer, but as a guardian of lives suddenly entrusted to him. Their journey to safety had begun, fragile yet undeniable, with courage, trust, and the promise of a new beginning guiding each step across the frozen prairie. The sun hung low over the horizon as Ethan led Lila and her twin daughters across the frost-kissed prairie, the soft golden light casting long shadows behind them. Each step away from the barn felt like shedding layers of fear and oppression. Though the weight of the past still clung tightly to Lila's shoulders, her arms ached from holding the tiny twins. But more than the physical strain, it was the emotional burden of weeks of captivity and abuse that pressed upon her. Every whisper of wind, every distant sound, reminded her of how close danger had been and how sudden freedom now felt. The ranch that Ethan guided them to was modest but inviting. A sturdy wooden cabin sat amid the rolling prairie, smoke curling lazily from its chimney, promising warmth and safety. The small porch creaked under their cautious steps as Ethan ushered Lila inside, helping her navigate the threshold without alarming the twins. Inside, the cabin was clean, well kept, and bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon light filtering through the windows. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and herbs a home. Not a prison. Lila exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The tension in her body easing slightly, Ethan showed her to a small room where blankets were laid out for the babies, their soft cotton wrapping promising warmth and comfort. Lila, still wary, allowed herself to observe the rancher more closely. His face, rugged and sun-worn, held a calm strength she hadn't expected in someone she had met only hours before. There was no rush, no force, only steady hands and quiet determination, even in his silence. He communicated reassurance, that they were safe here, that she could rest, and that her children's lives were now protected. As the first night fell over the prairie, Lila began to feel a cautious sense of security. The twins slept more soundly in the soft blankets, their tiny bodies curled against her chest, their fragile breathing a gentle rhythm that filled the room with life. She rocked them slowly, whispering lullabies she remembered from her own childhood, each note a thread weaving hope into the fragile fabric of their existence. For the first time since their birth, she dared to imagine a life where fear did not dictate every action. Ethan moved quietly around the cabin, tending a small fire and preparing simple provisions. His movements were respectful, allowing Lila space to care for the children while ensuring the home remained a sanctuary. He did not hover. He did not demand explanations, and he never rushed her in these subtle gestures. Lila began to see that trust could be rebuilt, that someone could care deeply without seeking to control or dominate over the next days. Routines emerged. Ethan fetched water from the nearby well, chopped firewood, and helped with small chores, all while giving Lila the time to rest and recover. The twins' tiny giggles and murmurs became the soundtrack of their healing, each sound a tiny victory against the echoes of fear from their former life. Lila began to find strength in this stability, allowing herself to smile more often, to laugh quietly at Jonah's small discoveries, and to breathe without the constant terror of her in-laws looming over her. Gradually, a bond formed between Ethan and Lila, though they had shared only hours together. The intense experience of the rescue and the care that followed had fostered mutual respect and trust. Layla recognized his protective nature, his courage, and the genuine warmth he extended not just to her, but to the babies. Ethan, in turn, saw Lila's resilience, intelligence, and maternal devotion, qualities that demanded admiration and quietly stirred something deeper within him. By the end of the week, the ranch no longer felt like a temporary refuge. It had become a place of safety and tentative hope. The twins thrived under Lila's nurturing care, and she herself began to heal emotionally and physically. The cabin, once a simple structure on the prairie, had transformed into a home, one filled with warmth, life, and the first real sense of freedom she had known in months. In this space, the foundation of a new family, forged through courage and compassion, quietly began to take root. The quiet of the prairie had been a fragile comfort, a temporary reprieve from the months of fear and confinement Lila had endured. Days at Ethan's ranch had brought warmth, soft laughter from her twin daughters, and moments of peace she had not known in years. But as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the frost-kissed fields, Ethan's sharp eyes caught a movement in the distance, an ominous dust cloud rising like a signal of impending danger. He knew instantly who it was. Her in-laws, relentless and unyielding, had discovered the escape. The knowledge that they were coming to reclaim what they believed was theirs sent a chill down his spine. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. The ranch had been a sanctuary, a place of healing, but now the threat loomed again, sharp and immediate. He could not let them harm Lila or the babies. Not for a second. His mind raced through possibilities, plans, and contingencies. Every inch of the land around the cabin became a tactical map inside the cabin. Lila held the twins close, their tiny bodies pressed against her chest. She had grown stronger in the safety of Ethan's home. Yet the news of the approaching in-laws sent waves of fear through her. Her body tensed, every instinct screaming to protect her children. She glanced at Ethan, who met her eyes with calm determination. There was no panic in him, only steady resolve. A promise that he would not let harm come to them. That assurance anchored her courage. Even as her heart pounded, Ethan positioned himself between the cabin and the horizon, the setting sun casting his shadow long and formidable across the prairie. The in-laws arrived, their faces twisted with rage and entitlement. Carrying threats in their posture and voice, Ethan did not falter. His stance was firm, protective and commanding. Every movement was deliberate, ensuring that Layla and her daughters remained shielded. His eyes constantly scanning for the slightest danger. The twins stirred, sensing the tension, and Lila instinctively murmured soothing words, reinforcing the bond of trust and calm between mother and children. Confrontation escalated quickly. One of the intruders advanced, attempting to assert control, but Ethan intercepted with precision, blocking the path with his presence alone. His calm authority and unwavering confidence sent a clear message. No threat would reach these children while he stood guard. Lila, emboldened by Ethan's courage, found her own voice. She spoke firmly, her words carrying a weight that startled even her oppressors. Asserting her right to protect her daughters, the in-laws faltered, unprepared for the unity and strength displayed by a mother and the man determined to shield them. Hung thick in the cold prairie air, the dust swirling around their feet, shadows stretching across the frozen grounds. The standoff tested each of them. Ethan's resolve, Layla's courage, and the in-laws' persistence. Slowly, the oppressors realized brute force alone would not win. Their threats dissolved into hesitant steps, and then into retreat, fading into the distant prairie. The danger had passed, but the weight of the confrontation lingered. Once silence returned, Ethan knelt before the twins, cradling them gently, while Lila pressed her face against their soft heads. Relief washed over them all. Mingled with lingering adrenaline, the experience had strengthened their bond, deepening trust and revealing the courage born from shared struggle. Ethan's protective instincts had proven unwavering, and Lila's inner strength had been affirmed in the face of fear. Together, they had endured the storm, and in surviving it, they found not just safety, but the foundation for love, trust, and family. The prairie, vast and open, now felt both protective and promising. Lila, her daughters, and Ethan emerged from the threat forever changed, aware that life's dangers could return, but also certain that together they could face anything. The ordeal had forged resilience, courage, and a connection that went beyond words, paving the way for a new life where hope and love could flourish. The first light of morning spread gently over the prairie, painting the Holly Ranch in hues of gold and soft rose. After the tense confrontation with Lila's in-laws, a profound stillness settled over the land, carrying with it the quiet promise of safety and renewal. Ethan stood outside the cabin, watching the twins stir in their mother's arms, the warm sunlight highlighting their small, delicate features. In these moments, he realized that the storm of danger had passed, leaving in its wake not only relief but the possibility of a future shaped by choice, love, and protection. Inside the cabin, Lila moved with quiet grace, tending to the twins and preparing breakfast. The room smelled of fresh bread, herbs, and the lingering warmth of a hearth fire. The babies cooed softly, their tiny hands reaching instinctively toward Ethan as he entered, a symbol of the bond that had been formed through both fear and care. Lila watched him with a mix of gratitude and cautious affection. After months of trauma and fear, she was beginning to feel the comfort of being protected, not by obligation or fear, but by genuine concern and tenderness. Ethan, for his part, moved with an ease he had not known in years. The ranch, once a place of solitary work and quiet reflection, now buzzed with the life of family. He had spent years guarding his own heart, believing that solitude was the only path. But Lila and her daughters had awakened feelings he thought had been long buried. The twins' innocent laughter and curiosity brought a new rhythm to his days, a gentle reminder that life could be full of joy, not only hardship. Over the following weeks, the ranch settled into a routine, each day reinforcing the sense of stability and belonging. Ethan maintained the fields, repaired fences, and managed the daily demands of ranch life. But his heart had shifted. Lila, strong and resourceful, nurtured the twins, instilling in them a sense of security and love. Her courage and resilience became evident not only to Ethan but to herself, as she realized the depth of her own strength and her capacity to trust again. The emotional intimacy between Ethan and Lila grew quietly but steadily. Shared moments, morning chores, laughter over a spilled cup of milk, whispered words while rocking the babies to sleep built a foundation of trust and mutual respect. Neither rushed the other. Their bond developed naturally, strengthened by the trials they had endured together. Each gesture, glance, and touch carried meaning, demonstrating that love could grow from courage, care, and shared experience rather than mere circumstance. Jonah and his twin sister, fully at ease in their new home, became the heart of the ranch, their small hands clinging to Lila, their curiosity leading them toward Ethan, and their innocent laughter all symbolized the new life that had blossomed from the shadows of fear. In caring for them, Lila and Ethan discovered a profound connection, not only to each other but to the possibility of family and belonging. Their lives, once defined by isolation and struggle, now thrummed with hope, warmth, and possibility. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan and Lila sat on the cabin's porch. The twins nestled between them in a soft blanket. A prairie stretched endlessly before them. Golden in the fading light, they exchanged a glance full of unspoken understanding, gratitude for survival, respect for courage, and the tender acknowledgement of love that had quietly taken root. The ranch, once a solitary refuge, had transformed into a home filled with life, laughter, and the promise of a future built on protection, trust, and shared dreams. In that moment, Lila understood that the past, though painful, had forged resilience and strength. Ethan realized that opening his heart could bring not only joy but a sense of purpose. Beyond the solitude he had known together, they had turned fear into courage, despair into hope, and survival into a foundation for a new life. The twins' laughter echoed across the prairie, a living testament to love, healing, and the enduring power of family.